Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. I do hope you're doing remarkably well. I'm doing fabulous, thank you very much, and I hope you're keeping cool because it's been very hot out there. But some of you, if you're living in colder climates, you might be feeling the opposite effects of very cold weather. Certainly we're getting extremes all around the globe, so keep yourself warm or keep yourself lovely and cool, and don't forget to get that fabulous drink, whatever it is that you enjoy. And you know the rules. If it's something I don't know about, I want to hear about it. So before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah and all your lovely listeners, most young girls dream of the day when they walk down the aisle, in the more modern contemporary equivalent of an exquisite Cinderella-style wedding gown, to marry the man of their dreams, whom has captured and won over their hearts. Their whimsical imaginations dance with the sparkling, glittering images of the quintessential perfect day, where nothing ever goes awry or amiss, and everything just flows so seamlessly, without a single hiccup. And following that flawless, consummate sequence of events, a life filled with so many happily ever afters. You never imagined for a single moment that the very best day of your life could turn out to be your worst day ever. A day so hideously dreadful and so deplorable that even remembering it hurts badly. It leaves behind a nagging dull ache in your heart, a bitter taste in your mouth, scratchy and dry. A desperate longing for hopes that were lost, like a ship wrecked out at sea, thrown violently against the rock so treacherously that it is beyond salvaging, or even beginning to save, as the damage is irredeemable. That was me once upon a time, about 12 long years ago to be precise. I was blindly oblivious, a dewy-eyed bride that naively, gullibly believed that nothing could ever go awry or amiss on her special day. How could I be so ignorant, so guileless and impressionable? Everything had been planned to perfection, which included all the last-minute details of the wedding, from the 3-tiered wedding cake in 3 different flavours, namely carrot, red velvet and lemon with poppy seeds, to the bridesmaids' dresses, along with the opulent Italianesque wedding venue in Washington State, surrounded by acres of verdant green turf, exquisite rose gardens, and large clusters of Douglas firs and spruce trees. I had been fleeceably swept off my feet by my worldly husband Ricardo Hernandez, and after a year of dating, he'd finally popped the question to me. I hadn't hesitated, not even for a brief second, for from the moment we met, my heart had literally done a double flip. Ricardo was everything that I could have ever wanted in a husband, kind, thoughtful, charming, and funny. It didn't hurt either that he was tall, dark, handsome, and very easy on the eyes. I had fallen for him very hard, and I was in no doubt that this was the man for me, the person that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with through sickness and health. I still remember the way my sister Amelia had reacted the very first time she met him. I vividly recall her saying to me, "Sis, this one's a keeper, and he's so hot," which of course is an added bonus. Even my parents had been warmed by the beguiling charm and allure of my fiancé, and my pernickety, pedantic mother pretty much fancied marrying him herself, and said as much, in a jovial, fun-loving way, which certainly meant Ricardo met her seal of approval, and my mother wasn't easy to please at the best of times. I glanced at my reflection in the mirror, and admired the curvaceous contours of my long, flowing wedding dress at every single angle. It was such a magnificent sheer satin fabric that sparkled with glittery diamonds on its bodice. I gasped in wondrous awe at my magnificent reflection, barely even recognizing the beautiful girl staring back at me in the long mirror. Was that really me, I wondered in awe? I really did look incredible, I thought, even if I said so myself. My curtain of long, dark, straight hair had been curled and lifted upwards, accentuating my high cheekbones on my heart-shaped face, whilst the spiring ringlets of hair had been expertly clasped together by a comb of creamy pearls. My makeup had been done with the subtle expertise of a professional artist, accentuating my very best features. I took in a deep breath, My heart began pounding like a bass drum. It wouldn't be long now before I would finally become Mrs. Hanado's, I thought excitedly. I began to quiver nervously, shaking like a jelly, my knees feeling as soft as marshmallows, while the nervous tension pulsated through my body like electric charges. I glanced down from the arched window of my bedroom suite at the venue. There was a sea of cars filling the driveway steadily. I could see my eager guests, clad in their finest clothes, along with their fancy eclectic hats, hastily making a beeline towards the wedding chapel, their legs almost running across the green turf, in their earnest impatience to find a very good seat. It wouldn't be long now, I thought, drawing in a deep, long breath. My father should be here in any second to collect me and guide me down the aisle. My bridesmaids would be waiting for me at the entrance of the chapel. I could hardly wait, but my fingers had become hot and clammy as I thought about all the eyes on me as I walked down the long resplendent red carpet. I was not inclined to enjoy being the centre of attention, even if it was only for a day. But regardless, I was determined to enjoy every minute of it. I could hear a little knock on the door of my bedroom suite, and I glanced at the clock. Surely that wasn't my father already, I sighed. He was way too early, I thought. But never mind, he might be able to calm down my rising level of angst. "Come in, Dad," I said. I was expecting to see my father, but imagine my surprise to see my younger sister Amelia standing there in her emerald green bridesmaid dress. She looked stunning, I thought, but the large upturned skull on her face most certainly robbed her of any attractiveness. She looked decidedly pugnacious and confrontational, like someone who had a bone of contention to pick with me. And on my wedding day of all things, I thought, couldn't it wait? Why was she so hell-bent on dampening and ruining the very best day of my life? If the shoe was on the other foot, I would most certainly not upset her on her wedding day, no matter what. "What's wrong?" I said, seeing my sister's frosty face go ashen white. "Are you all right, Amelia? You look like you're going to faint. Has something happened?" Alarm bells began pulsating through my body like electric shocks. I began to wonder if someone had been involved in a tragic car accident. My sister's brown eyes looked piercingly glacial as she stared at me, without a glint of kindness or compassion. Her nostrils flared, and the muscles around her jaw tightened significantly. I had never seen her look so frigidly cold and mean like this before, rather reminding me of a crotchety, bad-tempered fishwife from the Pike Place Fish Market in Washington State, the kind of woman who spends her entire life bickering, nagging and shouting. "Come with me now," she said, virtually pushing me out of the bedroom. "You need to see Ricardo, right now." Her tone was sharp, hostile and unnerving. I felt exactly like a naughty schoolgirl being marched off to the headmistress's office to receive a stern punishment. "Don't be silly," I protested. "What you're doing, Amelia? Don't you know it's bad luck to see him before the wedding? In my brand new dress?" My sister failed to listen, but with one hand she roughly pushed me towards Ricardo's bedroom, knocking on the door. "Who's there?" said Ricardo, opening the door, whilst busying his fingers by fastening a velvet green bow tie around his neckline of a very elegant dress shirt. He looked really stunning. My sister pushed the door back violently, and with one hand virtually pushed me into the room, while my stiletto heels nearly caused me to lose my balance, as I went gliding backwards, almost tripping up on myself, but luckily Ricardo stopped my fall in an instant, and I managed to steady myself on my legs. "What you doing here?" said Ricardo. "It's bad luck for me to see you in your wedding dress." My sister glared at Ricardo with inflamed eyes that reminded me of a wild cat. "Tell her," she screamed at Ricardo, "or shall I? Shall I tell her, or are you going to?" "Tell me what?" I asked, my eyes darting from Ricardo to my sister, back to Ricardo again. "Well, are you going to tell her?" "We've been having an affair," said my sister. "Ricardo loves me. He doesn't love you at all. I'm sorry, but you need to know the truth before it's too late. You don't want to marry a man who's in love with someone else, do you? I couldn't do that to you, sis. That would be grossly unfair." "Shut up, Amelia. That's not true," said Ricardo, looking at me earnestly. "We did have a fling. I'll admit to that. but it meant nothing. Absolutely nothing. Your sister, she's the one that seduced me. But I don't love her. I could never love her. I only love you, Evangeline. I've eyes only for you. It's you I want, not her." For a moment I stood there like an ice statue, hardly daring to believe the words that I'd just heard. They plunged into my heart like sharp blades, stabbing me over and over again with a tortuous, unforgiving pain. How could two people that I loved better than life itself betray me in this atrociously despicable, heartless way? "It's not true," I trembled. "It can't be." The tears now flooding down my cheeks like heavy raindrops. My whole body became numb with the shock, as if every feeling of mine was momentarily paralysed, as the gravity of what I'd heard was too momentous and heavy to take on board. It was like being hit by a sudden volcano and the molten lava trickling down the mountain, stinging your soul, burning you from the inside out, until there is nothing left of you but smouldering ash. "I don't understand," I blurted out. Why would you do this to me?" "I'm sorry, sis," said Amelia heartlessly. "But whether Ricardo admits it or not, we're both in love. And this should be my wedding day, not yours," she snapped. "Shut up, Amelia. You're just seething with jealousy because I don't want you. I never have, and I never ever will. You aren't a patch on your sister here," he said, looking at me devotedly and reaching for my hand. "It's you I love, Evangeline, and that's a promise. We were meant to be together forever," he said, kissing my hand. "You're beautiful. You're kind and loving. Everything that your sister is not. This is why I love you so much." I snapped my hand away, glaring at both my sister and then at Ricardo. "You both disgust me," I cried in horror. How could you even do this to me?" And at that, I bolted towards my bedroom suite, hurriedly grabbing my handbag and car keys and hurtling down the sweeping staircase, through the lobby, across the luxuriant turf, past the rose gardens, and finally towards the gravel parking lot, fringed by large oak trees. I made a hasty dash towards my car. I was getting the hell out of here. I had no intention of getting humiliated. I flung open the car door and dived onto my seat, shaking violently like a jelly. I placed on my safety belt and glanced up to see my sister smiling, a mean, vindictive, nasty, almost triumphant smile. She was enjoying every minute of this, I thought, whilst Ricardo was waving me down frantically, shouting, "Stop! Stop, Evangeline! Can we not talk about this? This is our wedding day, for goodness sake! You can't throw us away! Not like this!" I didn't care. I didn't care at all. In that instant, my world had been turned upside down. Everything had changed. Nothing would ever be the same again. I found myself zooming out of that venue, passing some surprised wedding guests who were probably wondering why the bride had now become a runaway and was abandoning her own wedding. I drove down some of those blissfully beautiful backcountry roads, lined with tall, statuesque Douglas firs. My thoughts were a whirling tornado of disbelief and horror, scattered around like the leftover debris after a storm. I was that debris, torn apart, dishevelled, no longer held together in one complete whole. I had lost myself, for the me I had known had been ripped apart, almost as if sharp wedges of shrapnel had sliced through me, shredding me into tiny, tiny smithereens. Could this really be happening to me? It felt too surreal, almost as if this horrible nightmare that I was experiencing was most certainly not real. Why had my sister betrayed me like this, with my own fiancé of all things? How could she do this to me? Didn't families have boundaries? As for Ricardo, how dare he cheat on me so indiscriminately, and with my sister of all people? It didn't get lower, nor did it get more depraved than this. In an instant, all the admiration that I once held for Ricardo withered away like a wild flower wilting on the open prairie, dying after a hot day in the sun, its fleeting beauty permanently expunged from it. as it finally shrank back to become one with the earth again. I knew that my relationship with Ricardo could never ever be fixed again, for the damage was done. It was way too severe to be repaired, for our relationship had breathed its very last, and the heart of who we once were as a couple was now in coronary arrest, beyond being brought back from the brink of death. It had beaten its very last. Tears of regret, disappointment, betrayal, bitterness, and lost dreams and hopes of what we could have been continued to roll down my cheeks, and the watery tsunami clouded my visibility in its hazy blur. I was losing focus on the road, and if I wasn't careful, I could drive into a tree. I knew I needed to calm down, so I drew over to the side of the road that overlooked an embankment, and I just parked for a brief moment and stared out into space. The outside world seemed so normal. The elegant Douglas firs looked like tall, serene giants, and the woodlands seemed so peaceful and tranquil. Yet in my heart, I was the direct antithesis of all of this. I decided I would take a walk in this pretty grove of trees to clear my head of any cobwebs, to calm down myself. Why should I give Ricardo the satisfaction of grieving over our lost relationship, I thought angrily. Why waste my time expending energy on someone not worthy of my affections? I glanced down at my beautiful wedding dress and deliberately ripped the central panel of it, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction as I did this. Perhaps it was a symbolic gesture on my part, symbolizing the end of our relationship and a marriage that could never be. I proceeded to walk through the woods, trying to empty my mind of all my thoughts, like a bag of bird seeds that I wanted to eject and expel, hoping that they would eat those seeds, or those thoughts, so to speak, so that all would be forgotten and remembered no more. Was I such an appallingly bad judge of character, I wondered? Had I not seen through Ricardo's fake charm that he piled on so thick when women were around? What an idiot I was, I thought, scolding myself for falling for a man as flaky and unreliable as Ricardo. And as for my sister, look at her. Where on earth were her family morals and ethics? It seemed like she had none at all. Our relationship was left dangling precariously now on tender hooks. Its fate did not look promising. How does one move away from the betrayal of a sister? Surely it drives a lifelong wedge between the two of you. And over a man, of all things, who was pathetic and unworthy like Ricardo Hernardo's. Perhaps in the long term she'd done me a favour and showed me what he was really made of. It was a little like discovering the diamond ring you wore all your life that you believed was so precious was only made of glass and had no value whatsoever. As I walked through the woods, I was struck suddenly by how pretty it all was. I started to gather a whole lot of pine cones in the loose material of my dress that I now had torn off to make a makeshift handbag, and then I sat at the edge of a rocky clearing and began hurling the pine cones as hard as I could at the tree. It felt amazingly good, almost like an emotional release of that pent-up anger that I was feeling. It was almost like a letting go. I continued to hurl pine cones at the tree as hard as I could, pretending that the tree was Ricardo, and that every single cone was now kicking him in the guts so hard that he was crying out in desperate pain. Good, I thought with satisfaction. Good! I hope it really hurts. I hope it bloody hurts, like you've hurt me. Now you see what it feels like. Something, or someone, began to join in with me in my strange woodland game. Someone else was throwing pine cones at the very same tree I was. But who, I wondered, looking around in surprise. No one was there. But I could hear a strange chattering sound, a sound that I cannot really explain. It sounded a bit like this. And then a large pyramid-shaped head with a deeply tanned human face peered at me from behind a large leafy sapling. At first, this strange anomalous creature appeared somewhat reticent, but I just ignored it and continued to gather my pine cones from the ground, throwing them at the tree again and again, completely lost in my own secret world, and so disconnected to everything that was happening around me. So much so that I almost didn't give the creature a second thought. I think I was otherwise so engaged in my thoughts, locked up in the disturbing emotions that they provoked, intermingled with brief interludes where I couldn't help myself from sobbing. But my strange incongruous behaviour, wrought with sadness and deep despair, had certainly given this creature a bird's-eye view of the turmoil I was experiencing, and I believe it felt my hopelessness as physically as you and I would feel a wind blowing against our faces. It would seem my emotional turbulence drew this creature out of its hiding place with a confidence like a rabbit from its burrow. And then this large thing, drew back the curtain of shrubbery, gliding towards me, stopping only inches away from me, and standing there. It stood there staring at me, like a tall statue in an opulent courtyard of one of those great icons in our history. That was how still the creature was. And then on her haunches she gathered some pine cones, dropping them into my lap, and keeping some all for herself. And we both sat from each other, about a foot apart, throwing pine cones at that tree, over and over and over again. She would collect the pine cones that had fallen, dividing them between us, and we would take turns in hitting that tree. Every time I hit the tree, I certainly imagined it was Ricardo, and it was so satisfying. I was beginning to so enjoy the presence of this strange, anomalous creature. I know it sounds completely crazy, but I do believe she was comforting me. And I do think she sensed the way I was feeling, and almost identified with it. I glanced at her, and it was like these golden pools of liquid love were softening the jagged edges of my broken heart. Of course I thought to myself, this has to be a Bigfoot, a creature of whom many has dismissed as legend. But here she was, larger than life, in touching distance of me. She towered at about 7.5 feet tall, possessing a small pair of pert breasts. Her body was thick-set and dense, with powerful muscular definition, and strong arm and bicep muscles, and very impressive shoulders. Her body was covered with long flowing hair of a dark auburn colour, while her head was shaped rather like a cone, which folded seamlessly into the shoulders, and I can't be sure whether she had a neck or not, because it wasn't very discernible to me. In my opinion, she looked more human than ape-like, especially in the facial area, which was strikingly human. Of course, those overlong arms that hung beyond the knees were rather primate-like. I noticed the area where the hands touched the knees, and the arms that fell to the sides, was absent of hair, as well as under the arm area, and on the knee area itself, where I imagine the skin tends to chafe itself like sandpaper. All of a sudden the creature glided away, taking her cover behind a sapling. As she sensed that something was coming, I hadn't heard anything at that stage. Then I heard the heavy footfall of crunching forest debris as they approached, and then I saw the silhouette of a man in a wedding suit. It was Ricardo. Typical, I thought. Why did he have to spoil things? Why did he come after me like this? I didn't want to see him at all. He must have seen my car parked on the side of the road. I didn't want him here. Why doesn't he go away and leave me alone? I want to be alone. "Oh, there you are," said Ricardo, with a concerned expression on his face. "I'm worried about you. The wedding guests are back at the venue, enjoying the delicious buffet. But it's not too late. We can get married in the dining hall. I checked with the priest, and he's more than happy to oblige the request. I told him you'd stormed off in a hissy fit, and we had a pre-wedding tiff, but I was going to sort things out between us. So come on, let's go back and get married, shall we?" "Sort things out," I said. "Are you kidding, Ricardo? There are some things that can never be fixed, and this is one of them. You had an affair with my sister, for crying out loud. In my book, that's a deal breaker. It's over, Ricardo. Do you get it? It's over." Ricardo's voice became enraged. I'd never seen him like this before. "Don't be ridiculous, Evangeline," he piped. "I told you that your sister came on to me. She was the one that instigated the affair. It meant nothing to me. It was only a bit of fun. Now go on, let's go and get married." "What the heck have you done to your dress?" he asked, looking appalled. "It's all torn up." "No," I said. "I'm not going to marry you. You cheated on me, And yes, I deliberately tore the dress up, if you must know. Ricardo began grabbing me and trying to push me through the woods back to his car. You can marry me like this, he said. You just snagged your dress on some brambles. That's what we'll say. You're coming back now, Evangeline. We're getting married. Stop being such a big baby. I began to push Ricardo away with my hands. Leave me alone. Get off me. I don't want to be anywhere near you. I told you. It's over. We're over. Now go away, I shouted, raising my voice angrily. All of a sudden we could hear a loud warning growl. It sounded like a tiger was in our midst, and for a second Ricardo stopped dead in his tracks and said, What the hell? I think there's a mountain lion in here. Something is stalking us. It's stalking us. We need to get out of here right now. The animal is dangerous. It could kill us, he said. I could see his eyes were wide with alarm, and he was physically shaking. It was a very discomposing growl. Then there she was, larger than life, my Bigfoot friend, running directly towards Ricardo and chasing after him, screaming at the top of her lungs, and that scream was so chilling it went right through me. Ricardo was so terrified. Run! Evangeline, run! This thing! It's going to kill us! It's going to kill us! He screamed. I wasn't afraid, for I knew that this Bigfoot female would never hurt me. But she was chasing off Ricardo, knowing instinctively that he was the cause of my upset. I could hear him screaming in terror, and I'm afraid I felt no pity for him. I wish I did, but I didn't. His car engine started up, and he began driving away at lightning speed. I could hear his thick rubber tires screeching. When the Bigfoot finally returned, she indicated to me through some miming body language that she felt Ricardo was not a good person. I was amazed she picked up on his energy and seen what I had failed to see myself. I spent another hour playing with the Bigfoot, and this kind creature lifted my spirits immeasurably. When I indicated that I needed to go, she seemed bitterly disappointed and expressed this by rolling her head to the left. She stepped forward, ruffled my hair affectionately, as if she'd known me all my life as a personal, close and very special friend. All of a sudden she noticed my sparkling pearly comb, and so I took it out of my hair and placed it in her hands, giving her a pocket mirror so she could see what it looked like. I remember she looked in the mirror at her hair comb and began to whoop happily in delight, jumping up and down like an excitable kid. I almost forgot how sad I was, because no one has ever been this happy with any gift I've ever given them before. But for this Bigfoot, receiving my hair comb was like winning the lottery for her. She was thrilled. She escorted me back to my car and watched me leave. Looking back, it was like being rescued by an angel on the lowest day of my life, when the gates of hell opened up for me. That happened a long time ago, and I never saw Ricardo again, nor did he resume his relationship with my sister Amelia. It was difficult to forgive my sister for the hurt she'd caused me, and all these years later, although I have forgiven her, our relationship is not close, but I am making every effort to open my heart to her, as living with bitterness in life is no life at all. I never saw the Bigfoot again, but if you see a Bigfoot wearing a pearly comb, it may just be my Bigfoot friend. So there you are. That's my story. Well, I just want to say that is the most fabulous story. And if any of you have got a story of being betrayed by someone that you really care about, like a sister or a friend, do tell us about it. So until next time, goodbye and good night.